An enclosure predating any known history and located high in the Grand Teton Mountains, very near the summit itself, has left everyone stumped as to who made the monumental and perilous effort to construct it, long before any Europeans set foot on the continent. This week, the Jackalopes explore the Enclosure, otherwise known as the Vision Quest site.
This week's episode of Jackalopes Explore is brought to you by Cloud Peak Center Lanes and Games, located at 1520 Coffeen Avenue in Sheridan. Stop in today to check out their amazing new arcade and prize counter, offering games and prizes for all ages and skill levels. From their full-service lounge to bowling alley and arcade, there is something for everyone. Cloud Peak Center Lanes and Games. Stop in today.
I'm Floyd Whiting.
I'm Aaron Linden.
And I'm Emi Whiting.
And we are your Jackalopes, four friends who discuss conspiracies, the paranormal, ancient mysteries, and the supernatural. This week, we are joined by Gene Sturlin, a man who knows the Vision Quest site very, very well. Welcome, Gene.
Thanks, guys.
Special guest.
Special guest.
We booted Steve out for this.
Totally. Got rid of him.
And this kind of feeds back into, and Grant will link this in the description of the video, back to one of the videos that we did on mountain mysteries.
Yeah.
Because we covered like Medicine Wheel and then this thing, not knowing that our own Gene Sturlin has intimate
Literally
knowledge
personal
of this.
history
Yeah.
with this thing.
Well, I've been there.
Beats any of us.
Beats it. Yeah, beats any of us. I mean, the way they describe it, Gene, when I look it up, they say it's very near the summit. How near the summit is this thing?
In height, it is near the summit. It is only like 400 feet below. Actually, the enclosure itself, the one tall, pointy little rock on the enclosure, is the second highest thing in the Tetons.
And why is this thing so fascinating?
Well, it's a total enigma. You know, for answer your first question, it is quite a ways away from the Grand because of the technical climb that you would have to go through to get to the Grand at that point. You kind of come up to the Grand in a bit of a circular motion from the Owen Spalding route, unless you're a technical climber. You want to go straight up. So the way they went, Owen Spalding, the first people in the late 1800s, 1891, I believe, they went around, and the only way I've been up there myself is on that route. And it's probably another hour or two to the summit from the enclosure.
And you've obviously summited this before.
3 times.
Yeah. And you grew up around that area, right?
Yeah, I was born in Jackson.
Yeah. So when it comes to this thing, why is it so fascinating?
Well, it was really unknown for a long time. The reason the first expedition thought they were on the summit of the Grand, and they described it, this Langford, this scientist, described it as a odd enclosure. That's how it got its name. And so Owen Spalding and that was like right after the Civil War. And then Owen Spalding, when they went up there, and they found the enclosure as well, which is its own peak in the vicinity of the Grand. You know, there's Owen and the Middle Teton and the Grand Teton, and then this enclosure. There's several other spires similar to it. The Disappointment Peak, which is a funny thing because another expedition thought they were climbing the Grand, got to the top and found out they were on a separate mountain altogether.
So that was the disappointment. That's amazing.
And so they named it Disappointment. Yeah.
My mom did that too, but it's like
because of its location and its height, it had been untouched, and it could be 1,300 years, or it could be somewhere in between. They have absolutely no idea. By the time it became known enough to be investigated, it was inside of the park, and they can't dig in it or anything. So, you can stand in it and you can kick around in the gravel, but you certainly can't move the rocks, nor would you. They're large.
Mm-hmm.
And
see, in the episode that we did, we talked about, well, there's a graphic and it's like, oh my gosh, these things are like the size of a bus or something. And
yeah,
then
that first photo.
Yeah, and then there's like a person standing there and you're like, oh,
That's
maybe
less
they're more like
impressive than a bus,
Yeah.
but they're still very large.
well, they're
Well, and-
probably, some of them you can't tell because they're buried in the gravel,
Mhm.
how far down they go. But they're ranging from 600 to 1,100 pounds, the larger ones. Of course, there's a lot of small ones, but
Yeah.
it is. If you see the pictures that were taken by those first two expeditions, it's virtually the same. There's nothing added, nothing taken away. There are two stones that look like headstones that are at the entrance that are missing now from the very first pictures.
Oh, so somebody did take something.
So they tipped them over or something, but you can't. The odd thing, I mean, this is a spire. They didn't bring them down.
Yeah.
They drug these things up there, and they were practically barefoot at that point in time.
Yeah.
And forget the mountain, the glacier that is down below the lower saddle is extreme. It scares me. Now the park has put some fixed cables around the side of Petzl Falls, but it's death-defying with mountain climbing boots. If you slide down off that thing, chances are you're not going to survive it.
Wow.
Where were we? That it was Intermittent Springs or whatever.
Intermittent Springs, south of where Gene's talking about now. Yeah,
We climbed up there. We could have.
Yeah, and there was
Could've
a
very easily.
glacier still, because I took her there in July, and the glacier that forms there every year didn't have an opportunity to melt away. But
Right.
it's clear across the state, so I was like, well, we drove all the way. We got to go see this.
we're going to do this whether it kills us or not.
But this is the thing. Floyd's like, well, maybe we should just, go do something. I'm like, no, we're climbing it.
See, just so you know, it wasn't me. Right. She looked up there and she saw like a bunch of young men really traversing this thing. And she's like, we can do it. They can do it. We can do it. Gosh, we ended up losing water bottles and all kinds of
Oh,
stuff.
we did, yes.
Because it was a
actually.
slant and you had to kind of belly crawl
Yeah.
sideways across this glacier to get to the continuation of the trail. This glacier, if you slid, it was.
Oh, you go right off.
It was
amazing.
150 feet, I
Well,
would guess.
there are holes in the glacier where the water surfaces and goes back down again. It's the Tetons toilet. I tell you, if you go in there,
You're gone,
you're
right?
getting flushed down to the bottom of the glacier in seconds. And so sliding down it, and you've got, major boots and ice axe.
Mhm.
These guys who did this, at whatever time it was, the Paleo Indians, which I think is probably right.
You think that's
Clovis
who did
people,
it?
the
Yeah.
Folsom people. There is an indigenous oral history of the enclosure that speaks of a young brave named Bishish, and they claim that he went up there and built this enclosure for his vision quest, where he was told by the Great Spirit his tribe needed horses, at which time he left there, was gone for 7 years, and came back with the first horses for the Crow Nation.
7-year
So-
spirit
Does he
quest.
go
I
to
want to know how
Spain?
many horses.
Yeah.
I want to know how many horses he brought back. Because if he was gone 7 years and brings back 2, we got problems.
It's going to be a setback.
It better
Yeah,
be a
there's,
male and a female. That's all I'm saying. Because
They didn't say he wasn't embarrassed.
They just said he came back.
So anyway, there is this oral history, but we have the Folsom people, which are the pre-Indian tribe people. The Folsom people were the Paleo Native Americans. Indians, Paleo Indians is actually the term they use. And they, I think, are the people who built it.
Yeah.
But they had to have, well, the problem that they come up with in archaeologically is that they don't believe that the Indians would have the technique and the wherewithal to climb Petzl Glacier.
Yeah.
which is below the lower saddle. From the lower saddle, yeah, you could get up there, and I suppose if you worked at it hard enough, you could drag those rocks up and down. But that getting up that glacier, which is always there, hence the word glacier,
Right.
and it's crazy scary.
Yeah.
I've been on it roped, and I've had people slip and fall, and if it wasn't for the rope, they'd be gone. And
So to get up there with, because what did you say these things weigh?
1,300 to 1,100 pounds.
well, anywhere from 600,
Yeah.
they say from 600 up to 1,100 pounds.
600 to
So I mean,
1,100.
that's more than like a couple
Man.
of dudes
Yeah.
on an ice wall
Yeah.
hauling them up there.
So
they
even though this
the
looks
ice wall
somewhat-
is some distance away, the enclosure, the peak itself, is pretty well nude of snow in the summertime and but there's no big chalk rocks laying around like that. It's pretty much a point.
Yeah.
And those rocks aren't native, like indigenous to that specific area.
Not
right?
within, a mile or more, I'd suppose, to get down to the
So they
upper,
transport
the upper saddle.
Things. Wow.
Which is the upper saddle goes between the enclosure and the wall of the Grand.
So this is legitimately a holy site that an ancient people risked their lives to build and put a
get there.
lot of effort into.
Risk their lives to get there.
Mm-hmm. So this is a heck of a thing. And I mean, people go up there all the time, don't they? I mean, I've seen a lot of photos.
Now it's become quite popular. There is a pretty cool YouTube of a young man who starts at Lupin Meadows, completely records himself all the way up, narrates it, describes the whole thing, and walks right up into the enclosure. And he's got a GoPro, and he turns around. You can see Mount Owen, you can see the Middle Teton, you can see the Grand, although he
I'm gonna drag you there next.
look up and show you the summit of the Grand. But legitimately, probably the best view you'll ever get of what this enclosure looks like, because still pictures really don't do it justice.
Yeah.
But you look down through what would be the gap between the Grand and the Middle Tetons, and it looks down at Jenny Lake, and then, of course, out, and you can actually see Jackson Hole, the town.
Holy
Oh,
cow.
wow.
So this is way the hell up there.
Like I say, it's the second highest point in the Tetons.
And you had the elevation of that, didn't you?
Yes, it is 13,000.
Not to put you on
Well,
the spot.
Well, just
Yeah,
the
13,000. The Grand's like 13,700. So take 400 feet off
like
of that.
13.3.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's up there.
That's
But
up there.
it's like 12 miles from the valley floor.
Now, is there a spot where some people could ride up there? Do people ever take like a ride up to a certain point and then get
And
off
then
the
hike?
horses
Yeah.
and hike
On
the rest of
horses?
the way up? Yeah.
No, the horses aren't allowed on the trails in
Oh.
Grand Teton. There's the only horses you ever run into are with that dude ranch that the Rockefellers own.
Yep. Right down the road there.
Yeah. So,
But if the natives, if he came back with horses, but it was already
Yeah.
built before he came back with horses, right?
Yeah.
well,
According
the
to
Crows, who know the other tribes,
Yeah.
the Shoshone were more likely to have built this than the Crow.
So how close could you get with a horse back in the day?
You could probably get the horse up to what they call the platforms, which is the place where most people camp before they begin whatever ascent they're going to do that next day. I've camped in the platforms. I've camped on the lower saddle.
So from the platforms
Next time.
to
Telling
the
ya.
enclosure,
Sounds so
how
fun.
far is it? Do you
To
think?
where?
From the platforms up to the enclosure.
Oh, geez, miles wise, it's hard to say because it's a lot of this back and forth.
Right.
Switchbacks.
Right.
It's to keep it from just going straight up. The trail kind of stitches back and forth. I really have never thought about it, but they say it's a 15-mile round trip from the Lupin Meadows to the lower saddle. At the lower saddle, you begin to go up. You go up Owen Spalding Couloir, and it is not technical climbing and I'm not a technical climber. I've done the Grand 3 times, and there's only one place you really have to be roped in, and that is there's a crawl that crawls across the face of the north face. You're virtually looking down thousands of feet into Cascade Canyon, but you're just crawling on your hands and knees, and then you come out on the other side, and they have a fixed rope in there that you hook into. It's scary. It really is. If you've got a fear of heights, you're going to get on that part.
Now, when it comes to like standing in this enclosure and looking down into that massive viewscape, could you really see as to why these native people decided, you know what, this is a spiritual place?
When I saw the enclosure, I'd never heard of it. I had never known that it was done by anybody other than a bunch of climbers or something that had just put these rocks up there. It wasn't until a few years ago that I discovered all of this lore about it. And I was going, yeah, I've been there. I did not know that I was standing in an archaeological site. I was just a guy up there climbing mountains, and there was these rocks,
Cool rocks.
But they, frankly, it is well done. And if you lay in it, you can lay your arms out like this and put your head, and your head is going back towards you wouldn't be laying in it and looking out at that. You're laying in it with it behind you. And it is just that big to lay down, stretch your arms out, and that large pointy rock is up against your back. And there is no room to monkey around in there. You're gonna, reach over and get your iPad and fast and wait for the Great Spirit.
Right.
So it's, I didn't even go in it. I just stood at the edge, and we were going to do a summit. This was the first 2 times I did the Grand. We ran into weather.
Yeah.
And the third time I only went up there because I wanted to go up there when I could see something. Mm-hmm. I was on the Grand on the 4th of July in a snowstorm.
Ooh, man.
Yeah,
that's fun.
I'm up there, I can't see 15 feet,
Yeah, you make all this effort, get up to the top, and you see
and it's
white out. Yeah, white out.
4th of July and it's snowing. He goes, I'm cursed.
Have you ever thought about getting back up there?
Well, I'm 74, and although I could hunt bear with a stick, I don't know if I've got the knees for it anymore.
Yeah,
to climb that far.
So especially the crawl section.
It doesn't from the lower saddle up is the bad part. It is the 7 or 8 miles of trail before, and the boulder hopping, and it just. I just have a really bad knee. I've been in a lot of horse wrecks.
Yeah, that I know. Now, when it comes to really think about it, to make this pilgrimage from anywhere in the surrounding area to this holy site probably would have been a pretty big deal. Because you've got to make the pilgrimage to the Tetons, which is a holy site anyway. And then make your way up, if you even knew where it was, to find this location. It's not like they all had maps and they were running around. They had by word of mouth. Well, it's up there.
Right. You
had to go find this thing. And I'm sure it's like a needle in a haystack. Like, Gene, you said you walked past it, 3 times before someone was like, yeah, that's...
Twice, yeah. The third time we had, I had a guide, and he directed us over. He said, you want to do something cool? Well, we got time. There's climbers ahead of us. There's oftentimes when you're on the Grand, there's a waiting line to get off.
Oh, wow.
There's a major rappel, and it's a free rappel. You come off of the Grand and you rappel down to the upper saddle, and for 3/4 of the rappel, you're just spinning around in a circle, going down. It doesn't, you see people rappelling and they're always facing, well, after you can't touch the wall anymore, there's No telling. No.
They're the ropes there.
I would just start puking.
Look out below.
And so, but people are waiting there, and there's like 100. Nobody trusts the straps that they put there. Well, I'm not trusting. There might be 15 of them so people put their own on, so that they're hooked into these straps, and then it's usually a double rope.
Yeah.
And so you'll drop down from a double rope, and it's almost a full pitch, the rappel. But going up, it's the same thing. Oftentimes you're waiting because people, when they're crawling under that overhang, you can't hurry people, and so you just wait for it and for them to rappel down, so you can go up there and look around.
So this place is actually visited quite often then.
I didn't know that it had until I began researching this and found out that it's now a destination climb. Because, frankly, you're just about there.
Yeah.
And that next part of the climb is got some death-defying parts to it. And I think it's cooler than for one thing, you're standing there, you're looking down into the Alaska Basin, which is the Idaho side of the Tetons. That's where Grand Targhee ski area is over there.
Mm-hmm.
And then Alaska Basin, I looked into that too. I go, maybe they came up that way. But they can't. If they're going to have to get to that wall at the back of, I think it's called Idaho Falls or something. And they still have to go clear around, and they come out of, I can't remember the canyon, Death Canyon, I think. And they come down from Death Canyon, and then they got to Lupin Meadows, and up they got to go the other way. So they can't get an easy way from Idaho either. So yes, but as for finding it, you just follow the Garnet Canyon, and it's going to take you there.
Mm-hmm.
Is any of this hike like heavily forested? I would assume some of it's not.
Not just right down at the bottom.
Okay.
Then,
so you could see Bigfoot there, potentially, is my thought.
Potentially.
Potentially.
you see them everywhere.
Yeah.
You don't?
Yeah, well, Bigfoot saw me one time and told his friends, and they didn't believe him. So.
Gene's one of those guys, though, that if I came across about the middle of the forest and he was just having a cup of coffee with Bigfoot, I'd be like,
Yeah,
totally.
I can see that.
When I'm on my horse, I'm going along, I'll pick up like skull-sized rocks, and I have a really tall horse. And I'll set it up into the a notch of a tree, and Kim, the owner, he'll go, "Why do you do that?" And I go, "That's some Bigfoot shit right there."
People walking the trail gonna be like, how'd that rock get up there?
Oh, they're all taking pictures. Oh my gosh, look at this.
How'd that get there?
You just sit back and giggle, don't you?
Yeah, he just shakes his head.
So, Bishish, the one dude, was the guy that supposedly built this by himself.
According to one.
According
legend.
to
One legend.
the crow.
Right. So,
but that's the only oral history of indigenous oral history. That's it. That's the only one.
I'm thinking UFO technology levitation.
Yeah,
That's what I'm thinking.
I figured that's what you would think, Aaron.
But I mean, like, we look at
That's where the
these,
pyramids came from. Come on.
we look at these, these prehistoric landmarks, these massive locations, and of course, when it comes to this location, it's not as big or as well known as, say, like Stonehenge or something like that, but when it came to the spirituality or the spiritual beliefs, you were willing to risk your life to make some sort of monument to whatever spirit you worshipped at the time.
So it wasn't aliens, Aaron. No.
Unless they were worshiping aliens.
Well,
that's okay.
I'm just saying, like,
You
this,
got me there.
this is part of the fundamental building blocks of culture.
Mm-hmm.
Where we all come together, because obviously this wasn't one man or one woman. This was,
Unless he was like Nephilim.
yeah, this was a people who came together at one point and decided, this is a special place. And maybe it was found by chance. Maybe it was found by, their version of an explorer where he was like, I just want to see what's at the top of that mountain.
There you go.
Somebody made that trek.
I believe that's where it ends. Really, this person that did that went just as far as he physically could.
Yeah.
Now, there's going to be a lot of photos that I provided that will be on the finished thing. But you see this. I mean, here it is, right there.
Wow.
Next to the,
Yeah.
This is not a just anything, but it is a peak that he could get to without a rope.
Yep.
And that is the end of that.
Right.
It was as far as they could get at the time.
Right.
And if
But
he was up there alone,
You think about that, though. I mean, like Gina was saying to me, you've got mountaineering gear, right?
Mhm.
Like the
Yep.
boots and everything. At best, would they have moccasins?
at
Exactly.
best.
At best.
Which is really where it becomes a mystery. The ability of them to get there, the outfit that they had. Of course, the Iceman that was found
Yeah.
in the glacier.
Yeah.
He had boots full of grass.
Mhm.
Who knows? These paleo Indians that could have had that. Possibly.
Oh, I'm sure. They knew how to take care of themselves.
And they want to? Did someone with a real deep-seated will to create something that was as close to he could get to his God,
Mhm.
and that was the end that he could go without a mountaineering gear, pitons and crampons and ice axes and ropes, and that at that point, that's it. That's the spot, the
Yep.
highest he could get without that equipment.
And at the time, that would have been seen as the holiest place in
that
the
was
area.
that
So
was
you-
their Tower of
To
Babel.
him,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is
Absolutely.
at one person, one guy went there. Probably no one knew he was doing it.
Mhm.
on a quest.
And he went up there, and that was how serious he was to find the highest point he could get to his spirit. And that's it. And that's what makes sense to me.
Yeah. And this is one of those things, like you and I are constantly back and forth. Was there outside or otherworldly influence on the building of this, that, or the other?
Right.
And of course not with this, but what this does is it adds credence to the argument that I always make. And I'm not saying you don't make it, but the argument that belief,
Mm-hmm.
engineering, and the human will is much more resilient and stronger than I think a lot of people understand. This individual who went up there was, at one point, he would have had the mindset, I'm either going to get as close as I can to the Great Spirit, or I'm going to die trying.
Yeah.
Driven.
Right.
Yeah.
Driven, absolutely.
But when Gene and I were talking about it, and he's like, "No, there's this glacier, and there's this stuff." It just made me think even more about how impossible
Mm-hmm.
this structure is.
And to get the rocks up there on
But
top
that's
of
the
it?
thing. Getting there yourself, I can see that. Getting the materials up there and then constructing it, it doesn't even seem possible.
Well, it's possible. It was done, and someone did it. And the cool thing was, it was so remote and so well hidden in just the structure of the peak that it wasn't discovered for so long that it survived.
Yeah.
The
Right.
rest of us people who write graffiti on the inside of the pyramids.
Yeah.
Yep.
Always drawn penises on everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
right.
Yeah, I've seen it.
So this thing, when it was finally
You've done it.
rediscovered by the park had been established, and it was now a federal law to tamper with it.
Yeah.
You can't even dig in it with a spoon.
Which I'm glad of,
Yeah.
because this is an ancient spot
It is
right
the
here in
highest
Wyoming,
archaeological spot that they know of.
Yeah.
In the world.
and that's incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
what a major!
It's 10,000 feet higher than Machu Picchu.
Yeah,
Wow.
and here in Wyoming, a lot of people barely know that Wyoming exists, which is fine.
That's
for
fine.
the majority.
Let's keep
I
it that
didn't
way.
until I met him. So.
but the idea, a lot of people don't realize the prehistory that this state actually has. Our own University of Wyoming is constantly discovering these major finds. Gene, the arrowheads, the spearheads. A lot of folks don't understand that this is how we date what prehistory is, because the technology of the napping was developed at this time, or to develop this type of spearhead didn't arrive until this time. And we have right here in Wyoming some of the oldest spearheads, arrowheads, and major advances in technology, prehistoric technology known to mankind.
We also have a lot of dinosaurs.
Yes, we do.
Well, these people were everywhere here. The ranch that we have now and the ranch that we had before, every single flat-topped ridge is festooned with teepee rings. They're stones. They didn't have tent stakes.
Yeah.
They put rocks around the bottom of the last robe that went around. Matter of fact, they were shingled like these skins around these teepees. They weren't like a big long canvas thing
That you see now.
multiple pieces. And they for generation after generation after generations, they came to the same spots. Up above, Fort Phil Kearny out there.
Absolutely.
You know where those guys are up there, and those statuettes with there's like 7 miles of teepee rings, one night next to each other along the top of that ridge. And over at our other ranch at Triangle S, they were there, and the ranch that I work on now, you get up on top of them. If you know what to look for, you'll find them everywhere. Often there'll be rings only about the size of a hula hoop, and these were similar to your Vision Quest rings. They would set in them. They were fasting rings.
Oh,
And
wow.
these guys would set in. They would not be that far away from their camp, but they would set in there and not leave the circle until they'd accomplished what they came to accomplish. But they
Wow.
were right there, and it was not miles away. I used to work up the Grovant in Jackson Hole. It's a river, and I worked for the Forest Service. I was stationed up there for years, and we found lots of these little fasting rings.
Incredible.
And so they were this solitude and this means of attaining some state where they could cross over from their consciousness to their spirit was done in this manner.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all a real personal choice. Some of them went to great extremes. Obviously, this fellow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like the Buddhist meditations, the meditations of Zen Buddhists, the trance-like states that some people can actually enter when praying a rosary. I've seen that, a lot of folks, because it's a more modern religion, tend to kind of lean on, well, it's just a practice, but it's a trance-like state that you enter. And
I just think like I'm going, hey, Floyd, you want to go on a spirit quest? You're like, I'll go over to this little circle. You go up there.
yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like if you think about, the culture, and I'm going to try and not stereotype any part of the cultures because they were varied and they were vast and they were many, but the brave, the idea that it is your job to provide food and safety for your people. This was your whole existence. And to be able to go out and reach these milestones of your development, you're a man now. We got to leave the child stuff behind. We still do that. And it was such a big moment in a young person's life to go from that childhood to adulthood. And then even as an adult, I don't know what direction I need to go here, whether that be in life or whether that be in truth, just the physical world. I don't know which way I should take us.
Right.
To go out, build your ring, sit there, enter that trance-like state, and commune with whatever is out there, which things that we're constantly talking about. The simulation theory, God, the Great Spirit, eternity. The Buddhists call it emptiness, truly reaching that point of clarity. So many cultures embrace this in a different way.
Well, and it makes me wonder if a shaman, a medicine man, or somebody actually did this instead of a brave. Maybe it was a brave, and he was like, I'm going to get as close to this great spirit as I can. But Man, that's some serious dedication. To get
Or
up
a
there.
brave that came home a shaman.
Well,
Well, it was like breathing to them, this other life. I mean, there's Carlos Castanedas wrote a series of books called A Separate Reality, and it was called A Yaqui Way of Knowledge. And he went and he lived with the Yaqui medicine men down in the deserts of Mexico. And they would take this peyote and would become moving in between time and the present, and in a spirit state. Their bodies were there, but they weren't. And he wrote these long narratives of what they did on these. And they weren't. He was with this Don Juan was his medicine man, and they traveled throughout the desert in this spirit state. It was a famous set of books that was a big cult following back in the 60s. And I mean, people became completely enamored with this separate reality.
Yeah.
And this is what they became in their vision quest, was a separate reality. It wasn't a fugue or a dream. It was another reality. And they truly believed that. Crazy Horse would not wear jewelry and paint, but he kept a little pebble behind his ear, because that he was told in his vision quest that would keep him pure and make him, even if he did perish in battle, he did it in a pure state. And of course, Sitting Bull had that, the dream of the falling soldiers. They were falling out of the sky, and to them, when the Battle of Little Bighorn, it fulfilled his vision.
It's incredible.
So I'd like to just change subjects just for like this last portion. I have a question for Gene.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had any like conspiracy, like what would you call them? Cryptids?
Cryptids?
Have you ever had any experience with cryptids or supernatural experiences?
Oh yeah,
or
because you've been
anything
out
like
there
that?
for.
Well, they say if you remember the 60s, you weren't there.
so he's had some psychological experiments.
I lived with some. I lived with two Indians, and they had the peyote that was
I
with
was
their.
going to ask if anyone took peyote here. I have.
I tried it. Yeah, it's an exclamation point.
That's a hell of a way to put it. So, have you experienced like a spiritual?
I
Revelation?
have experienced a spiritual revelation, yes, in my own personal life and my own personal faith. I am a Christian, and I'm a Christian down to every molecule in my body.
Mm-hmm.
I have not the slightest doubt in my mind of my faith, but I'm not sure that it isn't it's just my interpretation of what could be everyone's faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, we were told, judge not lest you be judged in kind. I already know I'm going to be judged by the guy who wants to make me take a cart instead of a basket at Walmart. You try to live your own separate reality, I guess. And, these people have intrigued me forever. I lived, my great-great-grandfather was Nick Wilson. He was kidnapped by the Shoshones and raised by Chief Washakie. Chief Washakie was his half-brother, and he came to Jackson. My great-great-grandfather was the first homesteader in Jackson, and that was him, Nick Wilson. When I grew up, I started in Wilson, which is a town outside of Jackson. And we knew about the Native Americans from that. It was part of our family.
Wow.
That Chief Washakie came to Jackson and visited my grandfather. My grandma knew him. Of course, that was long before me, but I was the fifth generation. You can imagine 5 generations from Nick Wilson, and it was hundreds of generations of these other people before that in that Jacksonville area. I've seen caches of arrowheads turned over in fields when they were harrowing fields. And there'll just be hundreds of these arrowheads that will just be turned up in the plow. These people were there for, 50, 60 generations before us.
Yeah.
With the untold, there's not a footprint out there that hasn't been touched. Once up the Grove one, I saw a ladder carved into a face for hands and feet, chiseled in so that they could, and it was at the end of a long, thin canyon, and they would climb up it, and so they could drive deer or elk and drop something big down on them, where they have to go through this little enclosure at the end. It had to, God knows, it looked well eroded, but it was very obviously handholds and footholds in this.
Incredible.
Wow.
But no Bigfoots.
Chief Washakie.
Chief Washakie, yeah.
That is, I know a lot of people, our listeners may not know that, but look up that name. Right outside of the University of Wyoming is probably one of my favorite statues in this state, and it is of Chief Washakie, and it is beautiful.
Crowheart Butte. Crowheart Butte is, the reason it's called Crowheart is because Washakie fought the Crow chief for the country. They said, we will meet mano a mano.
Wow.
Winner takes all. He killed the Crow chieftain or brave and ate his heart to honor him.
Yeah.
That's why that's called Crowheart, that mountain up there.
It's absolutely incredible. Ancient sites. Not only ancient sites, but an ancient people. And it wasn't until in my later years now, as I'm kind of entering them, that I really started to pay attention to what was said as opposed to what I'm looking to say. And I've had the pleasure of sitting down with a few indigenous people now, and a lot of them are pretty young, but they have a resurgence in their cultures. And the more I learn about these peoples, the more fascinating and beautiful they become. And so if you ever get the opportunity to go to a talk or attend a presentation, I would say jump on it, because it's almost as if we've lost more of one type of knowledge than we ever gained of any other, And a lot of people, to include some Europeans who are well written, feel that this was the way that the human experience was supposed to actually be lived. Tribal, connected with the land. A lot of people who have made those choices to go out and live that way, even today, say that they feel satisfied, the anxiety's gone, the pressures of the world. You got to wake up in the morning and make all these grand plans and work like a dog to make sure that you're ready for the winter. And they're happier than hell.
Oh, right.
Doing it,
That's why those survival shows are so popular, probably.
I think so.
Honestly.
I think so.
I kind of want to go see this thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Like in person.
It's an absolute journey. Yeah.
It's real doable.
Yeah.
And you could do the enclosure and back to Lubin Meadows in a day, but it'd be a stretch. I don't know. You guys are young.
I don't know.
Not as young as I used to be.
I got one good knee. I got the other one starting to ache a little bit more and more. But Gene, I want to thank you so much for doing all the research and coming and talking to us about this. This is a beautiful site, and it's one that I grew up south of where you grew up, quite a ways south. But and I never even heard about this until Aaron brought it to me after you had brought it to him. So thanks for taking the time to be with
really
us
cool.
today.
Appreciate it.
Any last words? Aaron, I'll give you the last word.
This is one of those things that I didn't know anything about. And just in my vast jackalope holing of looking up crazy things, looking up stuff in Wyoming, especially for that Mountain Mystery episode, I'd never heard of this thing. And I was like, this is crazy. And so I was kind of, I think Gene and I in passing, I was like, oh yeah, this thing. He's like, I've been there. I'm like, you've been there? Like, it's the highest archaeological site on the planet.
Which is amazing.
And he's been there 3 times. So I was like, well, you got to get on this thing. I mean, this is crazy that somebody we know has been to this thing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know a few people that have been like to Stonehenge or to the pyramids or whatever, but somebody that's
well-known
actually gone to this insanely high enigma that nobody really knows how that got there. That's pretty cool.
I would say if you visit it, leave it as you found it, but
that goes with anything. Leave it as you found it.
maybe you'll find something more than the physical up there. You've been watching Jackalopes Explore.